Virgil. Famous first line. Arma vidumque cano. Roman Latin is kind of like German, who pronounce V's as W's. I know it sounds stupid, but you know, what are you going to do? Famous 3 words. The first 3 words of the Aeneid. Been translated many different ways. Basically, arma, like arms, weapons, fighting in a way, although really more about war. Virum, we get the word virile from that. Man. Que at the end just means end. For some reason, they put it at the end of the word that you're connecting to the first word. Weapons and man, cano, like cantare, cantare, I sing. Arms and the man, I sing, in one famous translation. What does that sound like? I'll give you a hint. Starts with an H, ends with an omer. First line of the Iliad. Menin Aeneid Thea. Of wrath sing goddess, wrath, Arma. First line of the Odyssey. I always forget this one. Let me think. I got it. Andra enepe something. Musa. Arme enepe Musa. Of man sing muse. Man. Arms and the man. War and man. We know that the Romans were not shy about just sort of, copying Greek culture. Even something as iconic as Homer. This is stepping it up a notch because Homer, I will remind you, wrote 2 of these poems. One about arms, the other about the man. And now, Virgil is going to say, yeah, I can top that. I can beat that. How about I do both in the same poem? Take that. There is, throughout the history of civilization, a strong component of the pissing contest. One artist comes across, looks at everybody that came before him, says, yeah, I can beat that. Humorous, perhaps, but it fuels creativity. Kind of like I suggest with writing term papers. Originality is overvalued. Take what you are given, what has come before, and try and bring something new to it. But stick within the basic strictures. Play the game, just be better at it. And that's what Virgil is trying to do. Fun story about Virgil. Okay, Virgil was recognized as one of the top poets in the Rome of Augustus. And Augustus was going around saying, okay, I just became emperor by killing off my rivals and declaring myself emperor. And of course, everybody's going to agree with that, right? Nobody's going to say, hey, he shouldn't be emperor. He just kind of, that wasn't nice what he did. And maybe he's not the best guy to be emperor. Maybe, maybe there are other candidates out there. So Augustine, perhaps a little paranoid, perhaps just a little bit smart, said, there are those voices out there. We need to quell those. We need to establish my legitimacy as emperor. And we need to give everybody in that whole Mediterranean basin a reason to support the empire. What can I do? Hey, I have in my arsenal the deadliest weapon known to man, a poet. So he, rings up Virgil, says, hey, Virg, yeah. You know that civilization Greece, it's, yeah. They got Homer, everybody's going, oh, Homer, oh, Homer, oh, Homer. Homer's just the best. And they still revere all of those people that he wrote about, and, Odysseus and Achilles and all that. And they're always singing in their praises and all that. Yeah, well, here's the thing, Virg. I want that. Write one of those for me. Give me a founding epic of the Roman Empire and justify my right to rule. Tall order. But Virgil knew on which side his bread was buttered and said, you got it, boss. As all artists do ultimately, let's face it, being a starving artist sucks. Spoiler alert, it didn't work out too well for Virgil in the end. He got banished because he said something that he shouldn't have or something, I don't know. Temperamental tyrants, they get pissed off and suddenly send people away. And he had to, I forget where he went. He went somewhere east, I think to Byzantium. And then he was eventually sort of forgiven and allowed to come back home, but he died on the way. What are you going to do? On his deathbed, I think he was one of those people who said, burn my works, they're not done. And nobody did, because nobody really listens to poets. And there are a lot of scholars who go through the Aeneid and say, well, it isn't quite finished. There are a few rough ends here and there, a few, confusing parts. And I'm sure Virgil would have fixed this if he just had a little more time, but he died. What are you going to do? So, with all that said, hi, Arma Widumque Cano. See, we're already way into the poem. 3 words. What's the deal with Virgil?
Alright, so book 1 starts off with Aeneas and his men. They're fleeing the coast of Troy after the Battle of Troy, which was destroyed by the Greeks. So as they're making their way to Latium, they will find a great city, which would be later known as Rome. But one of the goddess Juno, she hates the Trojans because they were destined to destroy Carthage, which was a city she really loved. And also because a Trojan man named Paris, he voted Venus as the divine winner of the beauty contest instead of her. So as they're traveling to Italy, Juno asked Aeneas, the god of winds, to send up a storm, which will stir up the waves. So, and in return, he can get a lovely nymph as like in marriage. So, as the storm.
Do me this favor and I'll set you up with my cousin. Sorry.
So as the storm was happening, like some of the ships like disappeared, but as Aeneas was about to lose hope, Neptune, the god of the sea, he notices that another god was in his territory, so he calms down the water, and they make it to the coast of Libya.
Stop. Hold on. Okay. That's a great opening scene. But I just want to, there's a lot going on there. And with all of this, there's, same thing with all the Greeks, honestly. There's so much going on and so many footnotes and so much backstory. It's very easy to just sort of, all right, I'm getting overwhelmed. I'm just going to start skimming through. But the little details are very telling, and they're fun, too. Who is Aeneas again? Where are they leaving?
They're leaving from
Troy! Those of us who remember the Iliad very well will remember that Troy was the enemy of whom? The Greeks. Greeks are bad in this. Greeks are the bad guys. Virgil wants to have that touchstone for the founding epic of Greece. He wants to have some connection to that, some way into it, so he can play on their court. And he'll say, okay, yeah, maybe we began with the Trojan side. And he just started flipping through his copy of the Iliad and came up with this one particular hero on the Trojan side who, we didn't know that much about him. We knew that he was the daughter of the goddess Aphrodite. And, he seemed to be a good guy. We don't know much else about him, so, he's that perfect blank page that you can pretty much paint anything on. So, Virgil really did just say, yeah, that's the guy. He founded Rome. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's essentially what he did. So it starts off with a sea journey. They're escaping, they're fleeing all the drama, which is, a big moment to jump in on. Virgil knows how to spin a story. He knows some dramaturgy. He would have made a great Hollywood director. In this opening passage, who is the bad character? Who is the opposition, the antagonist, if you will? Juno! Juno is? Hera! Very good. Juno is the goddess Hera. Now, again, we remember from the Iliad, Hera was siding with the Greeks largely. So she is already, in this construction, especially bad. She is another example of the troublesome woman. They're always causing trouble. But in a very specific way also, because just look at how she is characterized from the very beginning. I believe it's line 5. You see that line? No, I'll read that line for me. Relentless rage. Relentless rage. What is relentless rage? Vengeance. Is it rational? No. Is it practical? No. It's pure destructive emotion. It's not the even-tempered practicality of the Roman way. It's really not the even-tempered practicality of the Greek way either, to be perfectly honest. But again, we see this characterization of the female character being hysterical and troublesome. So there's that. She goes to Aeolus, who pops up in the Odyssey. He is the king of the winds. He's like a minor deity. And she says, do me a favor. Whip up a storm and wipe out those Trojan bastards who are escaping. And he says, I get my power through you and your husband Zeus, your brother Zeus as well. So I am obligated, I'm happy to do it. Now, Aeolus is a king, technically. Right? Yeah. But he is automatically just going and saying, well, okay, you outrank me. I have to listen to you. So you asked me to do something, I'm going to do it. What does that sound like? Like a servant. Hera is, or Juno is, the superior power here. And he is, yes, he's a king in his small realm, but she outranks him. She is the top. He is a mid-level functionary in this construction. The history of colonialism is at times a little unseemly. And while Aeolus is king on his island, he can't match that against Queen of the Gods. So there's a little colonialism note there. And again, remember all of those disparate nations that fall into the Roman Empire. They need to be told that, well, you know, yeah, you can have your little kingdoms, you can have your little power structures, but you know who you work for, right? And when the time comes, do what the big guy says. Little subtle messages, sneak it in there. Maybe you're not aware of them, they're there. But, and oh, this was great. The storm comes up, destroys a good proportion of the fleet, most of it really, or seems to. Basically drives them off, destroys several others. Whom does this irritate? Neptune. Neptune is Poseidon, god of the sea. And he comes out and he's like, well, now, wait a minute. You can, Aeolus, that's great. You can blow winds, but the water itself is my domain. So, you know, you can blow winds on land, but if you start to mess in my yard, that's not okay. He outranks Aeolus, so he can do this. But I love how he does it. Where'd he go? We're on line 175. Quicker than his command, he calms the heaving seas, putting the clouds to rout and bringing back the sun. Struggling shoulder to shoulder, Triton and Simotho hoist and heave the ships from their jagged rocks as the god himself whisks them up with his trident, clearing a channel through the deadly reefs, his chariot skimming over the cresting waves on spinning wheels to set the seas to rest. So he basically just, and this enormous storm quells, which is nice. You know, it's good to be the gods. But look where the poem goes then. None of these choices are ever arbitrary. This isn't just trying to find, you know, a cool way of saying something. Just as, all too often, some huge crowd is seized by a vast uprising, the rabble runs amok, all slaves to passion, rocks, firebrands flying, rage finds them armed. But then, if they chance to see a man among them, one whose devotion and public service lend him weight, they stand there, stock still with their ears alert, as he rules their furor with his words and calms their passion. That's a weird simile to go to there. You're talking about a huge conflation of nature, gods and nature. And your go-to example is politics, essentially. Somebody coming up and saying, no, we must keep calm. A public servant who writes enormous poems where they conflate gods and nature with politicians. It's a weird fit, I think you can see. I see. It would behoove you to agree with me. But also the enormous power of that, because you are suddenly elevating that political character to the level of gods and nature. And it's not something particularly grandiose in itself. He's not saying an emperor or a king. He's saying a public servant, which is somewhat modest, somewhat restrained, somewhat plain in its trappings. The public servant who would keep focused on the goals ahead, the practical, realizable goals. But in that, he is still able to calm the storm. And look how the storm itself is characterized. A rabble that runs amok, all slaves to passion. People who give in to their emotions, who are slaves to passion, who are swept up in this enormous mob and they just want to destroy stuff. This public servant with quiet dignity can calm them all down. There's something awesome in the power behind that, but also something very Roman in its characterization. It's the Greek reverence for moderation, for rationalism, but with an extra spin of calm, quiet dignity. This is an enormous contribution to civilization going forward, in that emphasis on don't give in to passion, stay focused, do what's practical. We see it most frequently on t-shirts today. Keep calm and carry on. This was the phrase that came out of World War II when the British were being bombed nightly by the Nazis. And you had the figure of Winston Churchill coming out. London is being bombed every night. People are dying, buildings are being destroyed. It's a horror show. They see the Nazis getting closer and closer and closer and are waiting for the Americans to get off their butts and join in. But Churchill keeps coming out, talking to reporters, talking on the radio, talking to crowds, saying, keep calm and carry on. Don't get hysterical. Don't get emotional. Stay focused. Do your job. It's an enormous concept. It's also a very convenient one. What does an emperor generally not want? Or any leader want? I'll give you a hint.
Are people in panic?
People in a panic. Yeah. Riots are very destructive. Riots are very hard to control. Once a riot begins, you might say, yeah, all right, those people got a point. They're pissed off about something. But pretty soon, people get caught up. Maybe they don't even know what the original riot was for, and they start just going crazy. It unleashes a lot of raw emotion. It unleashes a lot of anger, a lot of rage, like Juno. Political leaders, civic leaders of all stripes want people to stay calm, want people to think. You can talk to them then. You can guide them. You can make changes that are rational and not crazy. But once they get whipped up, anything can happen, and you cannot predict where that will go. So the fact that this message is being driven right at the beginning of this poem is not an accident. This poem is about establishing a Roman character, the character of the Roman people. What does it mean to be a Roman? But it's also about power, about establishing it, reverencing it. Think again of that public figure, the sheer authority invested in him. But it's also about using that power. And here, the power of the poem is using power to reinforce power. But it's also just a great scene. That image of the god just coming up, seeing all these waves and hurricanes and tornadoes, and well, that's enough of that. That's awesome. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Tell me about Aeneas.
So, they land at the coast of Libya with the 7 other ships that survived the storm. And while they're there, they were starving. So Aeneas went out to look for food, and he found a couple of deers, which he kills like 7 of them to make a feast. So as Venus is watching them, she tells Jupiter why such hardships are falling against the Trojans. And Jupiter kind of like smiles at her and says that their fate is firm, and that no matter what, Aeneas' descendants will be the founders of Rome, and that they will be rewarded with unlimited wealth. So the next morning, Venus, she disguised herself as a huntress, and while Aeneas and his friend Achates,
I think it's actually Achistes, but I don't know. Pronunciation, it's freaky.
So as they're in the woods, Venus tells them about the story of Dido and to look for her.
I'm pretty sure that's Dido, but I could be totally wrong about that too.
Oh, and she was saying the background of her story, how she was married to a wealthy Phoenician named, I think it's
Zacchaeus.
Yeah, Zacchaeus, and how he was murdered by her Dido's brother. And
Dido.
Yeah,
you say Ditto, I'm thinking about copies.
Yeah, and then at night, like while Dido was sleeping, he came to her in a dream, like her dead, and told her about her brother's treachery. So, and he told her to flee the city of Tyre, I think. And Dido and the rest of the people that opposed her brother left to flee the city and found Carthage. So then Venus revealed her true form to Aeneas and enveloped them in a cloud so they will stay invisible. So as they made it to Carthage, they see the remaining crew members they thought that were lost in the storm. They see them asking her for hospitality, and she like assures them that she will offer them anything. And as they were looking around, they saw a shrine of Juno, and they also saw artwork depicting the fall of Troy. So as they were surprised by her like hospitality, that the clouds disappeared, and and she saw them, and then Aeneas tells his son to get gifts from the ship and to give it to her. And Venus, she was kind of suspicious of Dido's behavior, that she sends Cupid, who disguised himself as his son, Aeneas' son, to make her fall in love with Aeneas. So, which works. And later on at night, as she's setting a feast, she wants Aeneas to tell his story so she can make him stay longer. And that's how it works.
Okay. Very good. How would you describe Aeneas?
Really brave and he's a really good leader
Really good leader. Why?
because he knows how to hunt. He knows how to like make his crew members feel better. Because when they made it there, he told them how the gods were gonna watch over them and that their fate was gonna happen no matter what happens to them.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever hardships go through their way, they're gonna go past it.
Okay. What is the very first scene with Aeneas in it? A close-up on him, if you will. What's he doing?
Wait, I think he was looking for food. Or
They were in the storm. How's he weathering that? What happens when he is in the storm? Is he standing like the statue of Augustus, pointing to the land? Is he saying, "Keep calm, everybody, and carry on. I'm in charge here"? Is he doing that? No. What's he doing?
he was like scared.
He was scared. He's whining like a little baby. Oh, I'm gonna die! We're all going down! Everybody just jump off! This sucks! I wish I had died at Troy like a hero. Now I'm gonna drown in the middle of the ocean. Nobody's gonna know anything. I'm gonna be fish food. It sucks! Is that a hero? Is that a normal perception on a hero? No? What is your reaction when you see somebody doing that? Like a baby. He's crying like a little baby. Exactly. This is not our understanding of a hero. When you see that, you go, huh, I thought he was supposed to be the hero. But he's kind of just a whiny little bitch. But just a little later, they survive, they land. He's looking around. He's starting to make plans already. All right, we got to eat. Let's get some food. He goes out, he hunts, he brings back some food. He sees to the practical needs of his people, not just the physical needs. Now, we are to believe, I believe, that none of the people on his ship would have seen him curled up in the fetal position, whining and pooping his pants. Okay, sure. Maybe he had like a little private area on the boat. The boats were not that big. Maybe it happened though. But around line 232 or so, he speaks to his men. Now they're on the beach, everything is calm, and he is putting out the brave face. My comrades' words relieve their stricken heart. Or the commander's words relieve their stricken hearts. My comrades, hardly strangers to pain before now, we all have weathered worse. Some god will grant us an end to this as well. You've threaded the rocks resounding with Scylla's howling rabid dogs and taken the brunt of Cyclops' boulders too. Call up your courage again. Dismiss your grief and fear. A joy it will be one day, perhaps, to remember even this. Though so many hard straits, so many twists and turns, our course holds firm for Latium. There fate holds out a homeland, calm, at peace. There the gods decree the kingdom of Troy will rise again. Bear up! Save your strength for better times to come. He's putting on a brave face. That is not the whiny little toddler that we saw in the beginning. We're told it's the same person. But what's he doing? He's leading. He's performing the role of a leader. He is perhaps shielding his own emotions. He had his little freak out. We all have them from time to time. But now, when it counts, when people are actually watching and they need a leader, he steps in and he does what he has to do. And that is what he always does. The word you see associated with him always is some variant of duty. D-U-T-Y. It is also sometimes called pious. These are epithets. Just like swift-footed Achilles, Aeneas is always, in this translation, duty-bound or pious. It's always some version of that. In the original Latin, it's pretty much always just pious. He always does what he has to do. In this instance, we can see the split in him where, on the inside, he's still kind of, in the pooping his pants mode. But on the outside, for all practical purposes, for all social purposes, he does what he has to do. He fulfills that role. Again, think in terms of an empire with a lot of disparate people. Octavian Augustus, he took the name Augustus after he became emperor because it sounded more important. Who's going to listen to somebody named Octavian anyway? Augustus, that's somebody you pay attention to. Octavian did not care what was in people's hearts, just so long as they did what they had to do, which in his mind was pay taxes and listen to what he says. Follow the law, pay your taxes. What you believe is entirely your concern. You could say that that's a fairly open-handed and liberal policy. But you can see that value reflected here. What's on the inside almost doesn't matter. What matters is that when the time comes, you do what you have to do. And think also of the value of that. If a Roman citizen, not just for the outlying states and the paying of taxes and all that, if a Roman citizen is called upon to serve the state, let's say in a military capacity or to donate some food or something that they grew on their farm or anything like that, they're free to grumble, but they have to do what's expected for the good of everyone. Swallow your own personal emotions. Swallow your own personality, almost. Do what you have to do. It's powerful. Um, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. Around the time, okay, well, you mentioned when he's wandering around, he runs into this this adorable little girl, and it turns out to be his mom in disguise. Aphrodite, here known as Venus. She is curiously cast not as the seductress we tend to see her in most Greek renditions. Here she is very motherly. You know, she's taking care of her son. She helps him escape Troy as it burns, and she is here to just sort of, guide him along, as a mother would. It's interesting that there are two goddess figures that are prominent right at the beginning, where you have the hysterical, troublesome Juno, and then the motherly, nurturing Venus. Two characterizations of women. Virgil doesn't have too many more than that. Madonna whore complex, as it is known to some. But they start talking. And as a little girl, his mother asks him, this is like line 447 or so, but you, who are you? What shores do you come from? Where are you headed now? He answered her questions, drawing a labored sigh from deep within his chest. Goddess, if I'd retrace our story to its start, if you had time to hear the saga of our ordeals before I finished, the evening star would close the gates of Olympus, put this day to sleep. From old Troy we came. Troy it's called. Perhaps you've heard the name. Everybody's heard the name. Sailing over the world seas until, by chance, some whim of the wind, some tempest drove us to Libyan shores. I am Aeneas, duty bound. I carry aboard my ships the gods of house and home. We seize from enemy lands. My fame goes past the skies. I seek my homeland, Italy. Born as I am from highest Jove, I launched out on the Phrygian sea with 20 ships, my goddess mother marking the way, and followed hard on the course the fates had charted. A mere 7, battered by wind and waves, survived the worst. I myself am a stranger, utterly at a loss, trekking over this wild Libyan wasteland, forced from Europe, Asia too, an exile. Boy, baby! Little melodramatic, little self-pitying. Oh, woe is me! Identified by her real name immediately thereafter, and not the little girl, the disguise she puts on, Venus could bear no more. And here I ask you to consider every mother of every teenage son ever in the frustration with this little brat. Venus could bear no more of his laments and broke in on his tale of endless hardship. Whoever you are, I scarcely think the powers hate you. You enjoy the breath of life, you've reached a Tyrian city, so off you go now. Take this path to the Queen's Gate. I have good news, your friends are restored to you, your fleet's reclaimed. She doesn't want to hear it. Enough with the complaining. Again, he is more or less alone. He's away from his crew, so he's giving vent to this inner turmoil, this sense of loss and persecution by the fates. And she is saying, enough. What matters is your crew is actually alive. They're not too far from here. Snap out of it. Get off the couch, you lazy bum. Every mother ever. But very practical. And you notice how he has all this soaring rhetoric about, oh, the fates have doomed me and all this. And she is just very plain in her speech. Off you go. Simple, short sentence. Take this path to the Queen's Gates, giving directions, practical instructions. I have good news. Your friends are restored to you. Your fleet's reclaimed. Boom. She's not going off into this ornate saga of what really happened or all the backstory or trying to, indulge his mood a little bit. She's just saying, nope, this is what you need to know. Practical. Simple advice. A good mom. Who would know? After she leaves, at that, as she turned away, her neck shone with a rosy glow. Her mane of hair gave off an ambrosial fragrance. Her skirt flowed loose, rippling down to her feet, and her stride alone revealed her as a goddess. And here the poem is doing a little bit of extra flowery language to try and impress on everybody that, she turned around and he can see, it's really a goddess. Magic. Ooh. He knew her at once, his mother, and called after her now as she sped away. Why, you too cruel as the rest? So often you ridicule your son with your disguises. Oh, come on. Whiny little bitch that he is. Guys. Shortly after that, around line 510, meanwhile, the two men are hurrying their way as the path leads, Aeneas and his companion, now climbing a steep hill, arching over the city, looking down on the facing walls and high towers. Aeneas marvels at its mass. Once a cluster of huts, he marvels at gates and bustling hum and cobbled streets. The Tyrians press on with the work, some aligning the walls, struggling to raise the citadel, trundling stones up slopes, some picking the building sites and plowing out their boundaries, others drafting laws, electing judges, a senate held in awe. Power. Here they're dredging a harbor. There they lay foundations for a deep theater, quarrying out of rock great columns to form a fitting scene for stages still to come. As hard as their task as bees in early summer, working the blooming meadows under the sun, escorting a new brood out. Young adults now of pressing, oozing honey into the combs, the nectar brimming the bulging cells, or gathering up the plunder workers haul back in, or closing ranks like an army, driving the drones, that lazy crew from home. Lazy crew, the commoners. The hive seethes with life, exhaling the scent of honey sweet with time. This is an interesting vision. What's happening here? Anybody? Bueller? What's happening here? Aeneas and his friend have crested a little promontory coming out of the mountains and sees the city below, the city of Carthage. Funny thing about Carthage, it's the primary rival of Rome in the centuries leading up to Augustus. For about 100 years, over the course of 3 separate wars, Carthage and Rome were at war. rival power centers. The most famous hero of Carthage was a general named Hannibal, who managed to conquer vast swaths of Europe and make it almost to Rome. Very famously, one of the weapons he employed, elephants. Because, not that they're the most practical or fastest, but people in Europe had no idea what an elephant was. And you see an elephant coming over the hill and you've never seen one before, and let's face it, wireless was really bad, you are going to poop your pants. So this idea of Carthage, which is where Dido is queen, rising, everybody who would hear this in Rome at the time would say, oh, that's a bad thing. You hear all this building, all this activity, this city rising from the desert, and you say, that's a threat. Those people are coming to kill me. And very specifically, this is put right there to warn that this is where it all began. Etiology, how things came to be. This is the story of why Carthage and Rome are enemies. But there's also that note of appreciation in there. There's a lot of dwelling on the labor itself, on the building. Remember, Romans were builders. They especially liked architecture. They liked building things. So they dwell on that. Tyrians press on with the work. They're very practical. The Roman mind is very practical. That's what impresses them. Some aligning the walls, struggling to raise the citadel, trundling. The citadel is it's a military structure. Trundling stones up slopes, some picking the building sites and plowing out their boundaries, others drafting laws. They're starting a government, they're starting a civilization, they're starting a theater, a culture, all of this. And this is what Augustus wants to do. He wants to harbor all of his people around some image of work, 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 work. Build something worthwhile. Because if we don't, other people will. We need to be stronger. We need to have more built. We need to have more identity in the value of that work. We need to appreciate the work, and you need to feel appreciated by doing the work. And since we're not going to pay you, we're going to celebrate you in the poem. And he goes to the image of bees. Bees are a favorite of Virgil. Virgil likes bees. He writes an awful lot about them. He likes the fact that they work. Look at a beehive. Well, look at video of a beehive online. Don't go near them. All of those little bees doing a job. All those little bees doing one job, working together. There's a queen who runs everything, but pretty much everybody else just does the work. Anonymously, uncelebrated, but look what they can accomplish working together. It's not an accidental image. It's not arbitrary in any way. Virgil is saying, you all need to be